Just going to change the topic slightly, Alan, for this next section and talk about carbon and net zero. So I was struck earlier because you said there is a difference between plastics and carbon and net zero, but they sort of like go hand in glove a little bit. Your motivation for the Midas Green Initiative was to cut carbon. That was it. That was 100%. Where is the carbon in our processes, in our activities, in our products, and then how do we pull those things out? So where was your thinking on carbon? Did you sort of sit back and say, right, where are the kind of the key bits of carbon in our processes, and you know what was your sort of approach to it?
I think where we should start is that when we began the Midas Green Initiative back in 2019, at that point I actually believed I was quite a green person. I thought I was quite a naturalistic character, and obviously climate change, the facts proved to me that I wasn't, and that was a real shock to me. I knew that climate change was being caused by the emission of carbon. I hadn't considered it up to that point, and within a few hours I realised that was very much at the root of the problem. So I utterly focused on removing carbon from my personal life and from my professional life at Midas. And I think once we began, all I wanted to do was make sure Midas became carbon neutral as quickly as possible. But obviously environmentalism, the need for sustainability, the principle of being a responsible plastics manufacturer went hand in hand with that, as you suggest. And so when we looked at all of the ancillary things that we do at Midas, everything from negating single-use plastics to making paper-based packaging solutions, that everything that we did, adopting electric vehicles, installing electric vehicle charging points, reducing our energy consumption, installing solar panels, all of the things that we did were just because as you reduce your carbon, you need to demonstrate a genuinely environmental approach to everything else you do. I mentioned earlier on, I am a legitimate tree hugger. It's no good reaching carbon neutrality and yet wasting loads of raw material and being frivolous with the use of fossil fuel-based materials. So I think carbon reduction focuses the mind and it focuses thought, and so you end up reaching across your business and looking at changing absolutely everything which isn't environmental.
Right.
I don't know if that helps answer your question.
So I think, so what you're saying is that actually that carbon seemed to be for you definitely a driving force behind all of your environmental sort of improvements, if you like. So actually so if you look at your carbon, you mentioned about transport, you've mentioned about energy, that if you're doing those things, then actually almost as a byproduct, you then start to look at other environmental issues like reducing waste, like becoming more efficient and getting all those benefits.
I'll give you a good example. We obviously have waste from the business. We use a recycling firm which is 20 miles away. We were very, very careful and always have been about what goes into our skip, and we're very proud of the fact that everything goes off to be recycled. We have a zero waste to landfill policy, which is certificated. But it dawned on me that our lorry was coming from Luton to Bedford once a week to collect our waste and going back to Bedford. Now, we're all aware of the issue of idling cars outside primary schools. It's a very, very sore subject, and quite rightly. So I thought, well, we're part of this problem. We decided to invest in a waste compaction machine, simply so that we could put 4 weeks worth of waste into our skip and have it collected once a month rather than once a week. It made no difference to our carbon footprint. It made no difference to us financially. We were still disposing of the same amount of waste per month, but it meant that we'd reduced essentially 8 lorry movements per month down to 2. Right. So 1 trip. And we gained nothing from that other than the knowledge that we were being responsible. We were doing the right thing, because the emissions from the lorry that collects that waste went from 8 times to 2 times. So that's just the kind of thing that happens when you start to look at your business differently and you start to be genuinely responsible.
So it's an interesting thought. So essentially you had a bulky waste, which it was filling the skip, you compact it down, and then you could, for the same weight essentially, but you're just using a lot less space, but you are taking out those lorry loads.
Those things are obvious once you realise
Right.
and once you start doing them. And as with all things that are carbon net zero related, everything's obvious once you start to do it.
Yeah.
You just need to look and begin that change.
And there's almost a kind of moment because no one's really helping you in this, are they? The waste companies aren't saying to you, we could reduce our visits. We don't have to come 4 times a week. We could come once a week and collect the same amount. It's kind of like it's got to be within you to come up with those ideas.
Well, you mean once a month rather than once a week. But another example, when we talk about waste is not just litter on the floor. We, as a manufacturing business, use a lot of compressed air. A leak creates waste because you're powering a compressor to create compressed air, and if you have a leak, that's going to waste. And we did a full audit on our compressed air system back in 2019 to see if we were wasting power because it was inefficient, and it turned out that it was. So we installed a whole new compressor system that was state of the art, the most efficient, environmentally friendly compressors that we possibly could. But in that process, we did a full audit of the factory. We repaired all leaks, so there were no leaks. But a really big gain was the fact that we run large CNC machining centres that use constant loss air. We blow our swarf away from the cutter using a draft of compressed air. And so often our programs run through the night. And when the program comes to an end, the machine stops, but the air continues to flow. We realised that was waste. We'd never thought about it before. So what we did, we devised a technique of fitting a solenoid into the machine ourselves, creating a different line of G-code which drives the machines to shut that solenoid at the moment the machine stopped cutting. And that made a massive difference to the amount of air we were using. And the combination of new compressors, control of waste air, control of leaks, meant that we achieved payback on our entire compressor system within 18 months. And that's something that commercially is very obvious, but we only did it because we were looking to save energy and be greener. So the motivation was to be green and to be environmentally friendly, but the benefit was pure bottom line profitability. And I think once again, once you start to look at your business from a purely environmental carbon reduction perspective, you inherently will save money. And I often say to people, saving money is making money. Why wouldn't you do that?
That's a fascinating point. So basically you had 2 different systems. You had your compressed air system, you had your CNCs, but then by effectively putting the controls into having one controlling the other, then you make those efficiency gains. Yes. Not something you would have identified, I guess.
We didn't think about it because it was par for the course, it was de rigueur, it was practice. And that's what the Midas Green Initiative did for Midas. It threw everything up in the air. We pressed pause, we decided to reevaluate everything to become a carbon net zero business and then go again, no matter what the cost. We were prepared to invest whatever it took. What we didn't realise is the fact that it would end up saving us money, therefore making money. The Midas Green Initiative has been a fantastic thing for the planet and in terms of setting the standard for a carbon net zero manufacturing business, but it has also made profit.
Something that strikes me in what you've just said is that did you work with your compressor? You must have worked with a compressor supplier or something to get a greater insight into those compressors.
We absolutely did. We're very fortunate. We work with a business called Anglian Compressors. The MD there is a very willing, intelligent guy. He knew that we needed to do some data collection. We needed to evaluate exactly what was happening rather than what we thought was happening. So he data logged our entire system for a period of weeks and then came back and presented the findings. That's how we knew we needed to upgrade our hardware, our compressor system. In the process of doing that and us investing and them replacing all of our compressors, he got insight into what Midas had become and where we were headed. That inspired him to do the same at his business. So Anglian Compressors now is another green, carbon neutral exemplar that inspires. We're very proud to work with those guys. It's humbling that we inspired them to do what they've done. But the fact is, the more that this ripples out, the more businesses adopt a carbon neutrality mentality and do everything that they can to green their businesses, the quicker we can approach a scenario where the entire country is setting a tone. We all talk about global carbon emissions, and we all worry about what much larger countries are doing to damage our prospects. But it has to start somewhere, and if it starts at Midas and ripples through the south of England, and ultimately we can push that across the world, we have a chance of arresting global warming.
So, yeah, so just bringing it back, on your compressor, you worked with your supplier. And then that's a really good insight that they were then data logging. They were then able to actually see the facts about where you were using it, and then by understanding what you were trying to do, then they were able to, work with you, if you like, to sort of build that solution. And as a byproduct, that's fantastic that they've then taken on their own initiatives and they're moving it out. Do you think that how much scope do you think there is in terms of environmentalism, in terms of carbon reduction, collaborating with your suppliers, collaborating with your customers indeed? How much scope is there in that to make further sort of carbon reduction?
A huge amount, and I think, particularly now, and it has been the case for several years, when you get your business into a position where it is carbon net zero and where it's audited and accredited with, let's say, past 2060, what do you do next? All these things are about constant improvement. We know that. We're always pushing. But the biggest thing we can do is to encourage others to do the same, to reduce their carbon footprint. So to that end, we have dedicated pages on our website. We have the Midas Green pages, the Green Initiative pages. We do things like this, where we try to spread the information that we've acquired. I have a very strong view that every piece of IP that we've gathered over these 7 years, we share. We don't use our greenness for our own commercial advantage. We will share everything that we've learned with anyone, and that includes competitors, it includes staff, it includes suppliers, it includes customers. We will do everything that we can to share every piece of knowledge on every piece of cost saving, on every piece of carbon reduction that we can, because this isn't just about Midas being green. This is about trying to make our entire world as green as it can be, to reduce carbon to the point where we arrest global warming. And so I think probably the most important thing within the whole of the Midas Green Initiative is conversation, discussion and dissemination. We must all work together to make the world a greener place, and we put more effort into that now than anything else.
Yeah. In terms of and that's brilliant. So this has kind of evolved, the Midas Green Initiative has evolved a lot further from where you were sat there watching sort of Greta and David Attenborough, and now it's a big thing with lots of kind of little tentacles, if you like. Going back to the question of collaboration, what would you say to an organisation who's going down this road? One of the examples that we were talking about earlier was you were talking about transport, how we transport ourselves. If we can sort out how we transport ourselves, then we can make massive carbon reductions, we can make massive environmental improvements. And you've demonstrated that. You've got electric vans that are taking product out, the carbon impact is in the vehicle, there's no emissions, you've got clean air, there's clean air coming out of the pipe, if you like. So you've got environmental issues and you've got environmental improvement and carbon improvement. How much scope is there, what would you say to an owner of a business to work with their customers to, if they've got a manufacturing site in the north of England and they're based in the south of England, that's a difficult conversation for them to start off. Is there a practicality to it? Is it a practical solution? Have you found that?
Well, of course there is. If they've got two sites, then they both stand on their own carbon footprint. Both sites can then look at what makes their carbon footprint. You don't need complex data collection tools to know that fundamentally your carbon footprint is based on your energy consumption and where that energy comes from. So both sites can do an immediate rapid audit of how the bulk of their carbon is emitted and do something about it. And I think you asked me, what would I say? Well, what I would say is do something, take a step. Everybody needs to act now. So change your power supplier. Think about where your energies come from. Think about how you deliver your product, how you work. If you've got staff that are running backwards and forwards between those two sites, what kind of vehicles do they use? Do they use public transport? Do they use diesel cars? Do they use electric cars? Think about your carbon footprint. Don't negate, don't avoid, don't duck. What you need to do is do something about how you emit carbon. If you really believe you want a green business, then those things are going to invariably be 80-90% of your carbon footprint. So change them and change them quickly. When you get to the extreme, and I come back to Midas being a plastics manufacturing company, we use polyurethane. Well, I have a fantastic business relationship with our local community forest, the Forest of Marston Vale. We've worked with Marston Vale for over 5 years now. We purchase offsets from the Forest of Marston Vale that are legitimate. They are tree hugger auditable. So although I make no carbon in all operations across all 3 factories, the product I sell has embedded carbon. I can't change that. I can't deny that. So I offset that carbon legitimately, locally, 3 miles from our site. It is totally eminently auditable. I can take customers and show them the trees within which the carbon in their product resides. But to me, that's still not enough. What I now do is I push our supply chain. And a great example of that is the fact that we have encouraged our supply chain to develop polyurethanes that contain plant-based polymers. And you may have seen my little daisy sample earlier. This is the 3rd iteration of polyurethane that we've developed that contains plant-based binder. So although in theory I don't need to do that, my relationship with Marston Vale means that I sell this with 0 carbon. That's not good enough. Offsetting is not the answer. It's a temporary solution. We need to develop plant-based plastics. Well, the market is not going to do that without encouragement from its customer base.
Right.
And because we hold the position we do, and we're so passionate about carbon reduction, I've pushed our suppliers to develop these materials. And this is the proof that we're now at the point where we have materials which are 50% of the global warming potential that they were just a year ago. That wouldn't be happening without companies like Midas pushing the supply chain to make change happen quickly. And I think that's the kind of example that I want to set. It's one thing beginning your journey and changing your electricity provider. It's an entirely different thing formulating brand new materials that are low carbon or carbon 0.
So this is a whole tentacle of the Midas Green Initiative. Let me see this. I want to feel it in my hand. So this is really interesting. I started my question by thinking about how does a business owner improve their environmental and their carbon. And you can think about, my thought was that you could work with your customers, but actually you flipped it around and you're saying actually you can push your suppliers further, even though you might not think, what power have I got to change my supply chain when this is a global supply chain of polyurethane or whatever. But actually you've just demonstrated that.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me add, this isn't just about pushing the supply chain to develop the materials that we so desperately need to be low carbon, but it's also pushing the customer base to adopt those materials.
Right.
Because it's one thing having the material,
Yeah.
It's another thing getting customers to buy it and use it and want it. So we are in this position where we're the center of the scales. We got the supply chain that want to just keep doing the things they've always done.
Yeah.
And we got the customer base that are risk averse and obviously anti-change. And we have to get them to see that there's only global benefit in us moving towards 0 carbon materials and the adoption of those materials. So we are the facilitator in this.
Yeah.
And again, it's only that passion to reduce the carbon content in everything that we are that will then get customers and suppliers to move in the right direction quickly enough.
Yeah.
Because this is all about pace of change.
Yeah.
The absolutely desperate need to act now.
So you're working in the medical device space. Change is a horrible process to go through with medical devices.
Indeed it is.
So you've got this product here, which is, you've said, is used in cancer treatments. So they're using this version now. That's probably been approved and it's signed off and the material is there. What you say is you've got this horrible process of change for them to go through, but actually by being part of that conversation right at the beginning, when the customer comes to you, you can say, look, this is our direction of travel. Now we're going to use this, but actually these are emerging technologies that we're coming up with. So why don't you should be thinking about this now. This is your version 2, this is your version 3 that you're then going to be using.
That is exactly what we do. We push, we push, we push. We try to encourage customers to use or to be open-minded to green materials. We're very fortunate. One of our customers is a world-leading robotics surgical device manufacturer.
Right.
There is nothing more entrenched in the medical device sector than this company. Fortunately, they are incredibly green. Again, it's humbling. They cite that we've inspired them to green their business, and this is a multi-billion-dollar business.
Yeah.
They have made it clear that they are first on our list when our material is commercially available. They want their products switching from 100% fossil fuel material to the 50% plant-based material.
Yeah.
They are waiting for us to knock on their door.
Yeah.
Sadly, there aren't many companies that think like that.
Yeah.
But at least we have those guys that are very, very keen. And as I mentioned earlier, this is how change happens. It's a ripple process.
Yeah.
So, of course, we won't stop putting the effort into all our customers and encouraging them to change to green materials. But we do have some customers that are hungry and are pushing us to do the same.
So this is a fascinating world now, because you took the decision that you're going to work predominantly in life-saving, life-enhancing products.
Correct.
So that is a way to say, right, this is how we're going to use this stuff. This is being dug out of the ground. There's only so much of it, so we're going to use it for very, very specific purposes. There are other industries, aviation, automotive, for example, that are facing these challenges though, where they're using materials where they still have that huge environmental impact, and they're being forced down this journey. We need to start producing better products, if you like, that have less impact. Is that your message to them, really, that there is this kind of incremental change that moves you to 50%? In 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, there's going to be something else that takes you further on, but you've got to start that journey now. Is that your message to your customer base, if you like, that actually these products are here, and with the right people, with the right motivations, you can start to get that incremental improvement?
My message is very clear to all customers, to all suppliers. Take a moment, think about what your business looks like from a carbon emissions point of view, and do something about it.
Yeah.
Make the change now. It isn't difficult to do. We're in our 37th year of trading at Midas. We've only had the Midas Green Initiative for 7 years. We made the Midas Green Initiative happen because we realised that we were partly responsible for climate change and global warming, and we wanted to change that. We wanted to do something positive. Everybody has the power to do that. I use the view that ant theory, we're all little ants scurrying around the base of the tree, doing what we do, minding our own business, getting on with life. And ultimately, this is a massive thing to change. It's not lost on me that little Midas in Bedford is hardly going to change the problems of the planet. But I take the view, do I want to be a good ant or do I want to be a bad ant? And frankly, I want to be a good ant. We have a lot of guilt because we made plastic mouldings for 30 years without thinking about carbon emissions. But we've now made plastic mouldings for 7 years, totally focused on carbon net zero. I think that makes us a good ant. And I would just ask everybody, not to wait until legislation forces them to change and forces them to monitor their carbon and reduce their carbon emissions. Be proactive. I keep saying it. Act now. Make the change first. Enjoy the benefits that come with becoming greener: staff retention, customer attraction, profitability, just general improvements in the meaningfulness of your business. It isn't difficult to do. I would just always encourage everyone to do something, and once they've made that change, be it their power provider or the vehicles that they drive, and then do another one, and do another one, and then get into measuring carbon properly, get into proper carbon auditing, and work on the fine detail. Keep pushing, set the best example, and then encourage everyone that you can communicate with in whatever way to do the same. Then you're making a difference. Then you can honestly believe you're a good ant.